Karate.
Sure. Thanks,
Hopefully,
Khalid.
are you planning to give them belts or?
Yeah, everyone is getting a black belt after this.
Okay,
So
good.
okay. And perhaps next time it will be judo. Yeah.
Now, next time it's going to be playwright, and it's like a mobile app, so we play that game.
Yeah, I'm happy that all the candidates who attended last week have attended this week. I'm happy, right? At least we can close this program with the consistent of 10 to 13 attendees, right? Which is really good. So having said that, Sumit, I'll leave the floor to continue the session and recover whatever that we lost last time to help the guys to learn more this time.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. I'll share my screen. So today, what we'll do is we'll go through the framework setup on karate uh, by by looking at one of their own setups on how they've done it. And we'll talk about some of the advanced features on karate and how the implementation of those features will look like. Also, I will be talking about or showing you guys how to set up a Gradle build for karate and how to execute Gradle test. Once that is done, if we get time, then we'll go through the JWT token and I'll show you the embedded library in karate uh, to see how authentication as well as on the JW2T token or on any OAuth to bearer tokens, how that will happen. But that's only if we get time today for JWT because it's going to be a little time consuming to showcase that. If we don't get time today, then we'll do it in the next session with the CI/CD setup that we'll do on karate. So there are two ways. The next session will be on two things. One will be on how to run karate through a Docker container, and also how to run karate through Jenkins, right? So that will make sure that we have the CI/CD set up with karate, as well as we'll try to simulate some of the deployment pipelines, how to run karate on those. And if we have a leftover a rollover from today on JWT, we'll include that also in the next session. Sounds good? All right, so what we have done is we already gone through the quick start and then we implemented some of the test, basic test to see how to set up karate. Today I'll be talking about how to set up the framework and how it should look like and some of the advanced features that has been implemented in this framework. I'll be talking about this. So I'll increase my screen size so that we can take a look and discuss. Uh, can you guys see my read my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the code, right? We're not going to go through any theory. We'll discuss it through the code. I'll go through the code and explain what that code is doing and how we should be implementing it, right? So if any questions in the meantime, you can ask me. So the first thing that we need to do before we create a project, so let's assume this is a Maven or a Gradle project. The source package will always be there, and then we'll have a main and a test. Because we are doing in testing, we don't need to use the main. It's mainly for any development work that we are doing. But test is what we'll use mostly when we're creating a framework. And then we'll have a folder structure called Java, and then we'll put our packages inside that, right? So the concept of folder and packages are very important because inside the test, we're going to create packages which will give us which will give us the freedom to execute or that or basically classify different projects running on Karate. So let's assume we have 3 applications that are using Karate framework. So how do you differentiate between those? So that those packages will explain it, and we'll put it in the execution runner to make sure that we only executing the test that we need. All these are not required for the purpose of framework. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go here in the demo. So this is what our structure will look like. So if you look here, there is already a folder with JWT where we have a JWT feature which is implemented. I'll explain it later, and I'll also show case this by running this JWT. But this is where you get all your info of all your how your framework should look like, and also how your all your features implementation, right? So either we can go through here, go one by one. So there is with one with OAuth also. So you can have a feature with OAuth saying this is your scenario where this is the payload that you are sending, and then you are getting a token from your OAuth validation, and then you're using that one in the next request, right? This is how it will look like. So you are sending your client your password, your secrets, your username and password, and then you're posting that request. And in the return, you're getting access token. And in the next request, you are using that authorization of bearer plus access token to get that particular resource or any get request that you are going to do moving forward, right? So what I would recommend is you download this demo folder, and because these features are already executable, so you can go ahead and execute these features and do practice, right? Rather than starting from the scratch and implementing those features, you already have a base built with you. Or if you want to implement your own features, you can use these as base to create your own structure and your own test, right? So when we talk about the framework, the most important thing that we're gonna do is let's go to the demo, right? And we'll look from here. So this is all the features that are there and all the framework functions that you want to add. Everything is here. So I'll explain one by one what those features mean. Simple get request in multiple scenarios in a test, which is greetings.feature. So if I go here, it will look like I'm sending a background of demo base URL, and then I'm giving a path of greeting on my demo base URL. Now, this is what I want to discuss. Where is this demo base URL coming from, right? So those are the things that are required in a framework, because demo base URL, let's say it remains common across your files. You don't want to keep adding it in individual test, right? So you will have a global configuration somewhere here where you will be writing those details, and then you can figure out where it needs to be there, right? So one thing that I also want to talk about is the parallel run. So this is where you will set up your parallel runs. So you'll have runner Karate environment, which is demo. So you're setting that property, and then you are setting up a path, and you are in the runner. So this is the runner function within the import of intuit.karate. So you can use that one. Once you use that, then you have the function to define path with particular tags, which you can either add or ignore, and then you are executing in the parallel as 5, right? For the but you can change this number to any number that you want as a parallel run. The only thing that we need to consider, so why I'm talking about parallel run is the thing that we need to consider during the parallel run is all tests that are running in parallel should be independent of each other, right? If they're dependent on each other, you don't have an order defined where you are setting that order and they're running in sequence, right? Because they're running in parallel, you need to make sure that all your tests are independent of each other. And that's the base of any framework that we execute, that we need to have independent tests. If you are having a dependent test, you write it in the same feature file itself, right? So when they execute in sequence, but that's part of the either the scenario or the feature, right? Going back to demo, there is header management that we can use. The headers are very important part of any API request. So you can either look at how to configure headers. You can either configure headers by reading headers in a JS file, or you can configure it based on any JSON. You can set different headers. Let's say there are some headers that are already there and you want to set a new header. Let's say authorization. So you can have your authorization set in the real time as well. And then you have multi-value headers where you have uh, multiple values for the same header. Let's say authorization, you have a dummy and then you comma and then one more value, right? So there are two values. So this is it's a comma separated value, so you can use comma to separate any multiple values within the same header. And then you can directly set header using JSON, where you already have the headers in a JSON format and you can parse it through here. Right. And also what you can do is you can create a common function and then you can call that common function. So what I would suggest you guys to do is you create a function which is going to be in the common library and not here, and use that function across your test if that header is going to be same across your test, right? So that way you don't have to write these values again and again. That's one part of the framework, that we want to keep everything that is reusable in a common library. All right, and then to give a simple example on sign in, so this is how you will write, which is URL again, base URL, and then this is your path, and then get request, and this is the header that we are setting, right? And then this is the scenario, which is going to use the response that we received from the top one. And then you can set different headers at different request level. Right. So what it will do is, this is a simple sign-in feature where there are 3 types of features that Karate has that it is mentioned, which is HTML URL encoded form, which is basically your encoded form that you are submitting, and then which is a post request, and this is a get request. And then you're manually creating a form request, right? And not using the form field. Otherwise, what you will do is, so let's assume this is your form field, which is basically your body. So you are not basically creating any JSON request. If you only provide the form fields, it's going to create that JSON body by itself. It's the same method that we use in a UI tool. So let's assume in Postman, we don't actually create a lot of bodies. We can add those in the form field. And then the body creates by itself and then send it as a request. So you can do that in a multiple ways, right? Moving on, this is a feature which basically tells to read from a file. So when I don't see it's reading from any file. Let's go back. Okay, so what it is doing is it's creating a request. So it's creating let's say it's creating a cat named Bob. So what it is doing is it is given path cats, a request named Bob, it's posting, right? So whenever you create something, it's mostly a post, right? Or you send a request with basically needs a body to be there, right? That's mostly a post request, right? And then once you create the Bobcat, you're creating another cat called Wildcat. And once that is there, what you are doing is you are checking if Bob and Wild are created or not, right? So it's going to be a request which you are reading from a JSON file. So basically you're matching a response to a JSON file, right? So it's a little complex in nature. It might be needed, it might not be needed, but let's assume you have a response what you need in a file. You can match it directly by reading a JSON file, and it's going to be in the feature file itself and really simple to implement. So you're not doing it. And then whatever response you got, you are validating that against a template, right? So basically, this is Billy that you got as a response, and then you're using billy.id, which is your path, which is an appendix to your path of cats and kittens. So basically, you are going to the path cats for a user Billy, and you're getting all the kittens belonging to Billy, right? And this is how you will match those responses. But the big part is that you can create those responses inside a JSON file or any other file, right? And you can match with it. This is basically a template validation that ID should be a number and name should be a string. And then ID should be wild.id and the name should be wild, right? It looks a little complex, some of the features, but when you start implementing it, it's basically you will come across one or the other time some team member will say that the response is really long, right? So I don't want to manually write all that code. I want to put it in a file and somehow match it, right? So those are and then you have the upload feature which is a multi-part upload, right? And then you can have that as an attachment, which is, again, you're reading test.pdf, which is your multi-part field, which is my file, and then message, and you're posting that. And then you are getting a response and you're matching that response, that some UUID is generated, right? Any UUID is generated, and your file name should be my file, and message should be this, and the content should be this, right? And then you're getting the ID of it, and then you're using the same ID. So because you put it in a variable ID, you are creating a new path of files.id, and you're getting status 200, which is a method get, and the response that you're getting is basically the content of the file. And then you're validating again with test.pdf, right? So you know that you uploaded a file, and then you downloaded the file, and you validated the content of that file with the response that you received, right? And then this is again what we got it from here, right?
Sumit, a quick question if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
That def ID is equal to response dot ID. So does it mean it is taking ID from response ID as a value?
That's correct. So def is creating a new variable, right? And when I'm getting a response, my response is coming in this format.
Okay.
Right? Which is ID, file name, message, and content type. So these are the 4 fields of the JSON that I have and the values of it. Now, because I don't know what ID will get generated, right? So I'm only matching the template, right? But I have the real value, right? So when this becomes my variable again, right? So when I go here, the field that I'm picking up is this, right? So response.id, right? Response is this and ID is this. So I'm doing response.id, and what I will get by doing response.id is this value, which is the ID of the file, right? Which is the real ID of the file. So here I'm not validating the real ID of the file because I don't know what ID number will get generated, right? So I'm just validating that it is generating a UUID, right? But I don't know what number that UUID is, right? So, but when I do response.id, that's the actual response I'm getting, and the real value of UUID, I'm passing that UUID to this variable.
Okay, if I have a use case, like sometimes I need to change that ID. Usually when it is a post, sometimes it will not allow the same ID, right?
Right.
If I want to change it or append it to some other value,
Right.
should I be able to do?
Yes. So what you will do is you will, instead of using def, you will use set. And you will say set ID is equal to response.id, or change that ID to completely any new value that you want. And then you can use that ID here.
Okay.
So instead of using def, you will use set.
Oh, set. Okay.
So you're setting that value of ID to some value, right? It can be response. So it can be, let's say, bearer plus response.id, right?
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So sometimes when you get the access token, it doesn't come with bearer, right? So you can append that bearer to the ID value, right? And then it becomes your whole ID that you can use in the next request. Let's see if there is some example of that.
It is setting up the entire payload.
Right. So this one is setting the whole payload, but you can use the same way of doing this, or even if you don't use set, you can directly put that variable in some variable, right? So you can just say match is equal to so if
I understood. Sumit, what you are saying.
yeah. So it's going to be match is equal to because I'm doing a string bearer plus this is concatenation, and then I'm doing response dot id. So this becomes my new variable, right? And then I can, let's say ID, right? Now this becomes my whole ID, and this ID I can use wherever I want. Next.
Okay.
All right. Then there are some advanced features which are dynamic parameters that we can write. So for this, you have to use uh, create a JavaScript function. So you can embed a JavaScript function in the feature file itself, right? I do not recommend that. I would still recommend that you use a library where you store all your JavaScript functions and use those functions by name here, right? You don't want to create your feature file uh, too complicated. The reason being that if you, let's say, you're writing, for you, it's going to be simple to understand. But let's say some business user wants to understand what tests are running, and if you send this file, they will not know what is happening in that file, right? What scenario is getting executed and how it is getting executed. So I still, uh, in my frameworks, I retain only this portion uh, and asserts so that whoever is reading is able to understand what the test is actually doing, right? It's still a little complicated. Trust me, when you send this to any business person or developers, even a simple feature file will be called as a complicated one. So the more complicated you make, the more issues they will have by reading or creating a feature file, right? So that's the bigger challenge. So now let's talk about some. I won't go into all the advanced features, but let me call feature. I think this. So this is a feature that you're calling with a parameter, right? So you have already created a feature, right? But that feature needs an input, right? So let's assume in that feature you need a username or a password for authentication, right? Now those username passwords can be dynamic, right? Or you need to send a body to that feature which is dynamic in nature, right? So like the barrier token, which keeps getting generated, right? Keeps getting changed after every 15 minutes, right? So in that case, you need to pass parameters to that feature, right? So this will allow you to pass parameters to the feature, and then you can call that feature and run accordingly, right?
It's a great thing. Sumit, a quick question there too.
Sure.
Let us say the called normal feature has got some statements in it. Okay, it is printing and it is doing something.
Right.
So what will it do if I call that feature? Will it execute the entire feature to the end first and then?
Yes. So let's assume this, right? Let's say we are executing this scenario. So the first thing it will do is it will call this feature, and how much ever scenarios are there inside that feature, it will execute all the scenarios. Because you're calling the feature and not a scenario.
Okay.
So inside the feature, if there are 10 scenarios, it will execute all the 10 scenarios.
So does it mean if it has a print statement somewhere, it will be also printing that thing?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
So it will be printing all the print statements, and it will be displayed in your report as well. There are ways to suppress the reporting functionality of the call feature. But then if something fails inside your feature, you will not know what failed in that feature. So even if you suppress that reporting in that particular feature file, call feature, but then if something fails inside that, the debugging will be really difficult for you to understand on which line your test failed, what was the error, and the reporting will not help you tell that exact line where it failed. Make sense?
Yeah, very much so.
All right. Moving on to some of the best practices. So when you look at the demo test.java, right? So you created a test base, right? Where you're writing all your configurations, right? So if I go to test base, this is where you're writing all your execution, so what you need to do. So whenever any test starts, right? The test base basically, so you're basically extending the test base, right? So the first thing that it will do is you will have all the configurations and all the settings that are here already set up, right? So before executing any test, let's assume this one is start server, right? So the first thing it will do is it will start the server, right? So let's assume there is a server that needs to be run before your test is executed. If you are using anything inside test base, that will happen first, right? So in the test base, the first thing that will happen is it will start the server, and then it will move on to execute anything that is that basically any test that you are running. If it's extending this class, then this server will run first, and then the tests will run, right? So anything. So this is a very good solution for adding configuration. So this you can use it as a configuration, which is kind of a global configuration that you can set before any test needs to run, right? So things like setting up your environment, right? You are tearing down an old environment and bringing up a new environment, or deleting your cache, or resetting your API server, or whatever you need to do, right? So you can do it from here so that you know that whenever the test is running, it's running on a clean slate and not on the existing one, right? So that's one example. There can be multiple examples like that, what you need to do before your test starts executing. What I generally do is I basically, especially for API, I go to the API server and clear the cache, right? Because if the cache is there and I'm sending the same request again and again, my response times is going to be very fast, right? That will not give me the real time value of the response that I'm getting, right? My response time will be really fast, and I don't want that. I want to calculate the real response time from the request that I'm sending, right? So sometimes I set this up when I run performance tests, right? Where I'm measuring the time. And then we have already discussed about the parallel run, so I'm not going to go through it. What I will do now is I will a little short of time, so I'll quickly show the Gradle test. So what we're gonna do is we already had karate test open, right? And we had pom.xml. For the quick start, what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the same Maven project and convert this into a Gradle project, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this pom.xml I'm creating a new folder. Say Gradle Karate. And I'm going to copy the pom.xml here. Open a command prompt. Is everyone aware of what Gradle is and how to install it?
No, can you throw some light on that?
Yeah. Okay, good point. So Gradle is it's a build tool, right? It's similar to Maven. So Maven is it is not a repository manager alone. What it also does is it creates a lot of plugins where you get some ease in building your project, right? So which is your which are your Maven project. So if you look at let's open the Maven project, right? So let's look at the POM. So I'll explain a little bit about what POM does and what Gradle does, right? So if you look at the POM, what it does is it basically allows you to have your libraries listed here. So you don't have to download those libraries or jars and keep it in your source, right? So you just provide the name and it will download itself when it's going to do a build, right? And then it has plugins, compiler plugin, and what we use is Surefire plugin for reporting, and compiler plugin basically to build, right? So all the things, otherwise you have to manually go and do those tasks. What it helps you achieve is that you only provide Maven as the main command, and then everything, whatever is defined in your POM will go accordingly, right? So I'm using for compiler, I can use any other thing, right? Any other plugin that is available for Maven, I can use those, right? So, and then I can have different servers. I can have Apache server, I can have Jersey server that I need to set up, right? I can set up all those configurations in this POM file, right? And when I do provide a single command, all these are taken into account and the build for your project is done accordingly, right? The same way Gradle works the same way, right? So let me create a Gradle project and then it becomes, so we're doing POM, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna convert this POM into a Gradle project, right? So let's do that. So Gradle provides this feature of having a Maven project converted into a Gradle project. So you don't have to start from the beginning. So I'm going to use Groovy. Okay. So when I go to Gradle Karate, I should have the Gradle project there, right? Which is, and then it works on the, sorry, it creates a Gradle wrapper around your POM. You can delete your POM, you don't need it anymore. The other thing that I need is the source, which is basically my code. And now my Gradle project is ready. And I can open this in IntelliJ, new window. So it will take some time to initialize the import. So it already created a build, it finished, it was successful. So if you look here, you have source, you have the same source code that you were executing before. And now you have, instead of POM, you have a build.gradle file, right? Now, this is the same, somewhat same in terms of pom.xml, but a little different as well, right? It also does the same thing. So these are the two dependencies that got imported, and then the repositories that we have, and basically that's what we need. But it's not complete yet. We need to set the source because we downloaded the code. We put the code inside, so we need to define the code here as well, right? So I'm gonna open this one because I've already input it here. So if you look here, I have defined the sources of the test. So everything source directories for the resources that I'm going to put, and which is not a Java file, right? So all the resources that are there, like configs or feature files, all those comes under my source directory as resource folders, right? And not the runner folders. So when I implement this task, this is a Gradle task, which means test. It's the same as MVN test that we do, right? So it's going to execute all the tests that are included in these files, right? Which are source directories. So it's going to use anything that is execute everything that is .java, right? So
what actually the runner is in Java, right? Why are we excluding it, Sumit? How does it run in that case?
So what I'm providing here is resources, right? So I'm executing the task test, right? But I'm excluding all the files that are not Java files from the resources tag. Otherwise, what it will try to do is it will try to execute the test runners, which are similar to feature file, right? Which are not Java, right? Not Java files. It will try to execute those as well, right? So what we are providing here is the resources, right? So all the resources, what I mean is all the feature files, all your common files, which are not Java files, like config.js, it's not a Java file, right? So it will not try to execute those.
We are
It will,
asking it to exclude all of them other than Java. Okay.
correct.
Gotcha.
So only execute the files that are .java.
Okay.
So there are multiple ways to run a Gradle project. You can directly run it from here. So if I do run karate Gradle test, it should run. So I had 2 tests. So it says 2 of 2 tests passed. And then at the end, it will tell me that this is the location where your report is. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the report. So you can look here. There are 2 tests. So if I go ahead, this is one feature. Under that feature, I have 2 scenarios.
Yeah.
Now, things to consider, right? The first thing is, let's say there are two Java files, right? One is user runner. What it is running is users feature, right? Which is relative to this. And then I have an example test. So let me enable this, right? Now, if I execute again from the build Gradle, now let's see what happens. Now, if you look here, it says 4 of 4 tests. We still have only one feature file and it has 2 scenarios, right? But because we have two Java files and this is running test all the feature files inside this folder, and this is running all the tests inside users.feature, right? For our purpose, both are same, right? At this point, but if I go to this, now it should say 4. So now it's if I go to summary, now it says 2 feature, right? But still we only have 1 feature, right? Which is users.feature. So you need to be careful on your structure of your test when you're doing Gradle. There are multiple ways you can go around Gradle. You can add tagging. You can remove this and provide multiple test packages where you are providing the resources only under, let's say, users directory, right? Test Java, examples and users, right? And not at the main level. So it's up to you on what test suites you want to create inside Gradle. There's another way to run Gradle is, okay, leave it. So I can directly go to command line where we have created this, and I can do Gradle test. Okay, let me show you this, right? So Gradle test is what? So if you look here, right, 2 actionable tasks, 2 executed, right? Gradle test running again, right? In 3 seconds. Gradle test running again, right? 3 seconds. Now, if you look at the time, 7:55, right? If I go to the reports, it shows me the time of the execution, right? Nothing has run, right? The reason being because the artifacts are already built. So it's not executing again and again because it's saying that those tests have already been passed, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean those artifacts. Once I clean those artifacts, now you should see the timestamp changing, which is not changing. Oh, I know the reason. So let's do it again. So it says 3 actionable inside, 3 up to date. So now it is starting executing, right? So if you look here, this is the artifacts were already there, and it said that artifacts were there. So it finished in 4 seconds. When I did clean test, it started the real execution and created a new report, which is this, right? So now you see the timestamp will change to 7:56. So whenever you're doing Gradle builds, the only challenge with that is that Maven doesn't have this issue, but Gradle does. But ultimately, Maven also creates those artifacts. But when you run the test through Maven, it doesn't take into account the existing execution time, right? Again, it's not going to execute, and it's going to say it's already updated, up to date, right? So talking about Gradle, it's a build tool, same as Maven, but there are certain differences on how Maven works and how Gradle works. You can choose any of these two depending on what your company is using. Even that, because if you're getting the developers involved, it makes sense to use the same build tool because everyone has knowledge of how that build tool will work. And your environment is set up for that build process, right? So let's assume you are running Jenkins, your Jenkins environment will be set up to execute Gradle, right? For Maven, there might be a chance that there are things that are not installed on the server that Maven requires, right? Or even the Maven is not installed, right? Depending on where you want to execute it, you can select either Maven or Gradle. Right? Any questions on this?
Sumit, ultimately we will try to integrate this one to a CI/CD pipeline, right?
We'll do it. We'll do it in the next session.
No. My question is the same command line we can just use it in CI/CD.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
So what will happen is, it's not the command line, it's basically your command, right? So when you go to a CI/CD tool, it will ask you on what platform. It will give you the options on what platform you want to execute. Let's say you want to run a Java environment, which is 1.8. If your CI/CD has capability to run Maven Project or Gradle Project, they will already have an installed plugin there. So all you need to do is provide this command. The first thing you need to do in CI/CD is that you need to check out the source code wherever you have listed this, be it GitHub, be it Bamboo, Bitbucket, whatever source code platform you have. First, the CI/CD tool will check out your repository from there. The second thing it will do is it will execute the commands into a particular source directory or the main directory, right? It depends on what your command is. And then the third thing is that it should be able to parse those results. So there are multiple ways CI/CD tool parses the result. What we are receiving is a HTML format, but there are multiple Cucumber plugins for Jenkins and Bamboo that can read the XML format of your report. There are JavaScript libraries that can read or parse Cucumber reports. So it depends basically upon you on what you want to do with those reports. You can either do it in an HTML format. Then if it is in HTML format, then you have to add this report location to your artifacts library, so that anyone who has access to that particular plan knows where to look for the report, right? The other thing is, what we do is we pass those results to an external system, let's say Elastic, and then we create a live dashboard of all the execution that is happening, right? So it pretty much becomes configurable on what you want to achieve through your CI/CD tool and how you want to show your test reports. Because you cannot go look in the workspace of your CI/CD tool and fetch the report of HTML and then send it across to them. You'll basically send the direct link to the HTML report to whoever needs it. But mind you, when you're doing the HTML report through CI/CD, it will be individual execution report. It won't be a time framed report. For that, you need a separate external system where you are sending those reports, and basically that's where you are getting a dashboard, right? So the dashboarding plugins are also available on Bitbucket, on Bamboo and Jenkins, but then you have to figure out what plugin you want to use, right? There are multiple Java plugins. There's one called Citrus that you can use as a framework plugin to pass those reports, but there are multiple ways you can do it to create a trend graph in the CI/CD tool itself. But I recommend you use an external tool set like Elastic or Amazon S3 bucket. Just put those results there and create a dashboard out of them.
Yeah, probably it will be a thing for next discussion, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Sumit, a quick thing here. Gradle Wrapper is also there. Or, Gradle
Yes.
Wrapper.
Yes.
Do we need to do something for that?
You basically don't need to do anything on the Gradle Wrapper. So it basically creates your Gradle Wrapper jar. So if you want to, so Gradle Wrapper might be useful in your deployment, right? So let's assume you are executing on any different server, right? And you don't want the source code checkout to happen, to other things to happen, and you want it as a complete package. So Gradle Wrapper will allow you to create that package and deploy it wherever you want to deploy it, right? But I'm not sure if Gradle Wrapper is really a necessity on any other. Uh, so if I go here to the Gradle, so we have a wrapper.jar and Gradle Wrapper
Jumping
properties.
in, jumping in as a timekeeper.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm just jumping in. I mean,
Oh,
I'm
okay, okay, okay.
to,
So basically, it's for it's for your distribution
just want to make
to
sure that we are on time. Yeah.
to different platforms. Let's assume you are creating it on Windows and you're running it on Linux, right? Now you need some consistency on what those things are do. A Gradle Wrapper will allow you to port that seamlessly without having any hiccups, right?
Sumit, one question here. So just now you didn't test the request response like you do in API, but you actually tested whether the build has been successful, right?
No, no, no. So if you look here, this is the test response that I'm getting.
Okay.
So it basically executed two scenarios. So if you go to the report, so these are the two features that were executed, right? Which is get all users and then get the first user by ID, and then create a user and then get it by ID, right? So the scenario this ran is from line 1 to 7, and this is a scenario from 2 to 18, right? So if you go here to users feature, this is what it's doing, right? So the first scenario started from line 7, the second scenario started from line 18. That's what it's saying, right? So when I'm doing this, I'm not doing a build, right? I'm doing test, which is Gradle test. And if you look from the overall perspective, yes, this is a build that is happening for Gradle, but in that build, I'm only executing whatever tests are there in that build.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. One more wonderful session, Mr. Sumit Mahajan. You have two more sessions to go.
Sure.
Take a break and let people to digest what they have learned. And guys, as usual, right? You can always reach out to Sumit in the Testoper teams. He's very prompt in responding. What else? What else? Yeah, just take a 4 or 5 minutes time, or maybe 1 minute time, right? After exiting this call, go to the Eventbrite link that I mentioned, and please register for the meetup program. Looking forward to have you all there. What else? What else? Yeah.
Khader,
So
Khader, this is Abdul.
yeah,
Please about the job channel and
yeah. Good point. Good point, guys. Do you all know in the Microsoft Teams? I think I did say that last time, but let me quickly share it here. In the Microsoft Teams, you have Testoper Jobs channel. What I need from help from you is go and look at this. If there is any jobs, please feel free to apply if you believe. And the second thing, what I wanted you to do is in your company, if there is any job, come and post it here so the community people can benefit from it. So we all have to work for each other to help each other, right? So please do that, Testoper Jobs channel. And then one more channel that we have is the Tech Teaser channel. So if you believe there is some important news that people want to learn, right, and interesting, try to post it here. And you also come and learn some of the interesting news that has been posted by other people. So keep yourself engaged. Don't keep yourself engaged only in the during the program when Sumit is talking, but also after and before. That's the only way we all can learn ourselves and grow together ourselves. Did I do justice for you, Abdul?
yes, Khader. Thank you very much.
All right, perfect. Team, take 2 minutes, and I wanted to ensure all 16 of you have registered the mic, the in the Eventbrite for the meetup. And I looking forward to seeing you guys in our next session on Friday projects or Saturday cloud computing, or the next week Mr. Sumit session. Take care, and that's all from my end. Sumit, are you good to go?
Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sumit,
Thanks
for a
all.
wonderful session. Yeah.
No.